construct, like you were talking about, reorganizing the universe based on past information,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a map in their mind, a theoretical construct.
That's a very good way. I mean, to me, the capacity of capacities, in some way, is to do that artistically. Okay? I'm going to come at that. What we've talked about so far are the various kind of capacities, and you might say that they fall into a couple of different levels. You just talked about one version of the capacity of all capacities, which is the level at which I participate, rather than the level at which I'm again, a coma patient being exercised. But some of the component capacities are, again, the desire, curiosity, the ability to hang out with ambiguity, to have a tolerance for frustration.
Open-mindedness, too.
What?
Open-mindedness.
Open-mindedness, yeah. Yeah.
Ponder.
Ponder, yeah. Chew, yeah. So I might say then, if all of these capacities, how is it that if these are the things that we thought were most important, given where we've been now, remember we've said we're going from a knower-oriented to a learner-oriented, and the learner-oriented requires that we become capacity-oriented. Yeah, I mean, we all made that together, right? That if we're going to become capacity-oriented, we just talked about a whole bunch of things that we're now saying, well, this is what we got to help people know how to do, learn how to do, to be able to, if you will, instrument their curiosity, use their curiosity like it was a flashlight on the belt, to be able to say, I'm curious, that's good, I'm going to find out about this, right? Rather than not even aware they're curious because it's chopped off at a level that's even before they're aware they were curious. Or that they're uncertain, okay? Somebody said, articulate a good question. What is the articulation of a good question? Of course, the articulation of a good question, you might say, is at the core of critical thinking. It's at the core of science. The foundation of science is the development and emergence of authentic questions, not your question, some question that I live in such a way that it's so vivid and real for me that in the case of Newton, he says, well, why the heck doesn't the moon fall? And out of that deduces gravity, because he had a real question, right? So what is the nature, what is the anatomy, if you will, of a question? What is the inner workings of a question? How is it a question works? I want to say that a question is the ever more coherent articulation of what somebody's really uncertain about. Obvious. It's like a flashlight in a cave. There is no more powerful thing that a learner has than the flashlight of curiosity and uncertainty that they can kind of shine into the darkness wherever it is they're going and use as their tools. Right? But are they taught or are they learning now to instrument those? So, what I want to say now is that once we go through all these capacities and we see that there's desire and uncertainty and curiosity and the articulation of a question, you might say that at the critical level, there's the ability to abstract coherently, to be able to differentiate orders and classes, to be able to see the difference between a category, a type, and a representation, which are all different lenses, right? To be able to formulate a good question, a good hypothesis, to avoid the tendency to self-deception, which is built into all of us, to be able to formulate the strategics of problem solving. I mean, I think that these things kind of embody in some ways some of what you were just describing. And that at the core of the critical capacities are some of the other capacities you were talking about, like desire, creativity, uncertainty, curiosity, ambiguity. And all of these things contribute to attention span. But what I want to say now is that, and this is what you kind of brought out, the capacity of all capacities is the capacity to participate, to become alive and awake and instrument your capacities, right? So imagine that what we're trying to do, what I call it the inner interface, an inner interface. It's the thing that children are learning in the world right now that's most significant and pervasive is that, remember we talked before about how children kind of learn to physically distribute themselves or audibly distribute themselves, to change their visual space, their ability to recognize words. All of these different things are components of how they extend into being here, in different ways. How is it that they do this? They do this by tuning and instrumenting internally, tacitly, before language, how their impulses get used in their body and in their mind. It's how they recognize words. Now, how is it we can connect up the world of knowledge, these capacities we've been talking about, this internal learning phenomena that I've just been describing in terms of these acoustics, and allow children to build, if you will, a dashboard inside. Okay? Not just a machine they become a slave to, like some critical thinking stuff, I think, but a dashboard that will allow them to be able to learn how to instrument and tune into and trust and utilize their own desire, curiosity, uncertainty, these phenomena that are the core of their capacities for learning. The core of their capacity for learning are these impulses. If they're not tuning in to trusting those impulses as the basis from which they proceed to learn, from what basis do they proceed to learn? They don't have any basis. All they can do is have habits acquiring habits. There's nobody home. And if we were going to create environments in which they could learn how to tune into and instrument these impulses in the way that we've been describing them, then what would those environments look like? Interpersonally, informationally, technologically, the way that a classroom was designed, the way that collaboration occurs, the way that measurement and assessment and evaluation happens, how would the whole thing work? That's what we're about. That's what we're trying to do. Now, I'll do one other thing before we get